Harold Jennings stood on the porch of his new Texas home, taking in the quiet suburban street, lined with freshly cut lawns and neat brick houses. It was everything he had worked for, years of long shifts, saving every spare dollar, and finally giving his family a safe, comfortable place to call home. His kids raced through the yard, their laughter echoing as his wife carried boxes inside. For Harold, this was more than a house. It was the dream of stability he had always promised his family. At first, the neighbors seemed polite, offering nods and half smiles as Harold unloaded the moving truck. But he couldn't help noticing one figure who lingered longer than the rest, the HOA president, a tall man with a stiff smile and a clipboard tucked under his arm. The man introduced himself in a tone that was friendly enough, but something about his eyes felt cold, as though he was already judging Harold's presence in the neighborhood. The first few weeks were filled with unpacking and settling in, but soon, small letters began to appear in Harold's mailbox. The grass was half an inch too long. His trash bins were visible for too many hours. Even the shade of paint on his garage door was flagged. Harold brushed it off, believing it was simply part of living under an HOA's rules. But as the warnings stacked up, Harold felt a pit forming in his stomach. The complaints were too frequent, too targeted. He began to notice the HOA president watching from across the street, jotting things down as Harold worked in his yard. Harold had moved here for peace. Instead, it felt like someone was waiting for him to make a mistake. The first month slipped by, and Harold tried to ignore the HOA letters piling on his counter. Most were trivial complaints, things no other homeowner seemed to be called out for. His neighbor across the street had his trash bins out for days, yet Harold was fined for leaving his out for a single afternoon. At night, Harold noticed strange things. His car tires had been let out of air twice, though nothing valuable was stolen. Once, he found muddy footprints leading from their sidewalk straight into his yard, stopping just short of his porch. When he mentioned it to a few neighbors, they shrugged or quickly changed the subject, as though they were afraid to get involved. The HOA president, Mr. Collingsworth, seemed to take a special interest in him. He'd often patrol the street, clipboard in hand, slowing down near Harold's house. One afternoon, while Harold was mowing the lawn, Collingsworth approached with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just making sure you're keeping up with the standards of the neighborhood," he said smoothly, glancing over the grass as though searching for a flaw. Harold forced a polite nod, but inside, unease spread. This wasn't normal oversight. This was surveillance. That night, Harold sat at his kitchen table, letters scattered before him, his wife watching with concern. "This feels like more than rules," she whispered. "It feels personal." Harold agreed. And deep down, he had a gut feeling she was right. For now, he decided to keep his cool. But something told him this was only the beginning. And Harold had no idea just how far the HOA was willing to go. The unease turned into outright hostility. It started with petty things, nails scattered near Harold's driveway, his mailbox mysteriously dented, and anonymous notes slipped under his door. "Maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." At first, Harold tried to shrug it off. But the timing was too precise. Every time he fixed something, another problem appeared. His wife grew nervous, double-checking the locks at night and urging Harold to speak to the police. But without evidence, Harold knew he'd only sound paranoid. The HOA president, Collingsworth, became bolder. He knocked on Harold's door one evening, accompanied by 2 board members. They spoke in calm, rehearsed tones about community standards and how some homeowners don't fit the vision. Though they never said it outright, Harold heard the message loud and clear. He wasn't welcome. What disturbed him most wasn't just the words, but the smug way they delivered them, as if they already had the upper hand. Days later, Harold discovered the most shocking act yet. A trench dug along the side of his yard, deep enough to block his car from leaving the driveway. Dirt was piled high, roots torn up, grass destroyed. He stood frozen at the sight, his fists tightening. This wasn't an accident. This was a message. The HOA had crossed a line. But what Collingsworth and his cronies didn't know was that Harold wasn't defenseless. Months earlier, after the first suspicious incidents, Harold had installed a network of hidden cameras around his property. Every movement, every intrusion, every act of sabotage, it was all caught on tape. And soon, the truth would come crashing down on them. Harold didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his dimly lit living room, laptop open, replaying hours of footage from his hidden cameras. His anger turned into grim satisfaction as the truth unfolded before him. There they were, Collingsworth and 2 board members, dragging shovels across his yard, laughing under the cover of night as they dug the trench. One even looked up toward Harold's window and smirked, as if daring him to react. Another clip showed them scattering nails near his driveway. A different camera captured one of them slipping a note under his door. Every petty, cruel act had been documented in sharp clarity. Harold leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. "Got you," he whispered. But evidence was only the first step. He needed a plan. The next morning, he called his lawyer, a sharp-witted attorney named Michelle Torres. Within minutes of seeing the footage, Michelle's eyes narrowed. "This isn't just harassment. This is targeted intimidation, destruction of property, maybe even a hate crime. They think the HOA protects them. But this buries them." Together, they organized the files into a timeline, labeling each clip. Michelle suggested contacting the media. Local reporters loved exposing HOA corruption. Harold agreed, but wanted the HOA board to feel the sting first, before the story went public. By evening, Harold's confidence had returned. The fear was gone. The trench outside his home, once a symbol of humiliation, now felt like the rope his enemies had tied around their own necks. The cameras had turned the tables. And soon, the entire neighborhood would see what kind of people were running their HOA. The next HOA meeting was supposed to be routine. Budget updates, landscaping complaints, and the usual chatter. But Harold walked in with Michelle at his side, a laptop tucked under his arm. The room fell silent. Collingsworth smirked. "Mr. Jennings, here to complain again?" Harold didn't answer. Instead, he connected his laptop to the projector. With one click, the room was filled with the sound of shovels scraping dirt, voices laughing in the dark. On screen, the footage showed Collingsworth and his allies digging the trench, scattering nails, and leaving threats. Gasps echoed across the room. Neighbors whispered in disbelief. One woman covered her mouth, whispering, "That's our HOA president." Collingsworth's face drained of color. This is taken out of context." Michelle cut in sharply. "Save it. This isn't just harassment. It's criminal. Mr. Jennings has already shared this footage with the police. And we're preparing a civil lawsuit. The only thing left is for the community to decide if these people still deserve to represent you." The room erupted. Long frustrated homeowners spoke up. Some furious, others ashamed they hadn't believed Harold sooner. Collingsworth tried to shout over them, but the tide had turned. His power evaporated in minutes. By the end of the night, a vote was called. Collingsworth and his allies were removed from the HOA board. Police escorted them out under a storm of glares and murmurs. Harold walked home with Michelle, the trench still carved across his yard, but now it looked less like a wound and more like a scar that proved his victory. He had faced hate, intimidation. If this story shocked you, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share this video too. Spread the truth. Join our community here on Echo Resistance, where real stories meet real lessons. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.